Hi guys, I'm Shmee. Hello to you. Welcome back to the channel where today you join me to take a complete look at the brand new BMW M3 CS. We'll go for a walk around, talk about the changes from the regular M3 and the M3 with the competition package. Then we'll go out onto the roads to drive it and see what it's like, go through the different driving modes before coming back to where we are right now at the BMW Driving Academy in Maisach, near to Munich in Germany, to explore it a little bit further out on the track and handling circuits. So let's get started and take a look around the M3 CS. As we get started then with our walk around of the new CS, you're no doubt familiar with BMW's heritage, and in particular BMW M's heritage in building lightweight, sporty saloon cars. Well, the M3 CS is their latest iteration based on the F80 M3 that was launched back in 2014, but also incorporating some of the aspects that we saw in the launch of the M4 CS around this time last year. So the ethos basically is increased power and lower weight through the use of carbon fibre components, more aerodynamics as you can see, but also, like I mentioned, a little bit more power coming from the 3-litre 6-cylinder engine up front. We'll have a look at that and talk about it in more detail, but on the outset, this particular car is very, very nice in this frozen dark blue paintwork. It's a lovely colour, frozen being BMW's terminology for the satin-esque finish that you can see on it, but it's certainly looking incredibly aggressive. They're only going to be building around 1,200 of these due to production reasons, and in Europe at least, most of those are already spoken for. So if you want one, you're going to have to head down to your dealer very, very soon to get your hands on the latest product from BMW M. Other upgrades also on the car: it has a more sporty suspension system, new M brakes, and then carbon fibre reinforced plastic components used around the car. For example, the bonnet up on the roof, which is left in the visible carbon fibre finish. Also, if we come back down to the front, you'll notice the extended splitter that runs the full length of that front leading edge. And then to the rear of the car, we also have the boot lip mounted spoiler for aero purposes back there, as well as coming round to the very back, the diffuser down here housing those quad exhaust tailpipes, the traditional BMW M tailpipes that you have down there at the back. So the car is about 10 kilos lighter than the standard machine. It also has the high gloss Shadowline trim that you can see around it. Interestingly, it's wearing Sport Cup 2 tyres, the stickier rubber from Michelin on their 20-inch wheels at the rear, 19s at the front. The paintwork, actually, when you catch a bit of the light on it, looks incredibly nice. But let's have a glimpse at the interior too, which also will come back to in more detail later on. But you can see in here sportiness all the way, the use of materials. I love that little M stripe that it wears up there. If you hadn't noticed before, the seats actually have holes going through them. Lightweight savings right there. New center console with the finish that you can see here, the CS badging up on the passenger side of the dashboard. New steering wheel finish as well, an alcantara, all prepared for track purposes. So this is a car designed to be driven out in a dynamic environment, but let's jump in it first and go find out what it's like on the roads. The sun's just poked through the clouds, so you can see the frozen paintwork glistening away, but I've also got the Bmw Key, the familiar older style key actually for this car, but the traditional lock, unlock and boot opening buttons. It's not keyless in terms of locking and unlocking. It does have a keyless starter button, which is very nice. Let me just climb into the car to switch this on and bring it into life. So down here, the bright red start stop engine button, and much has been discussed about this engine, but let's just hear it. That engine sound is a particular talking point. Some people love it, some people hate it. What I can tell you about it is that it's very distinct. You know that it's the engine from an M3, an M4, and now also going into the M2 competition. However, we're sat in here, we've got the 7-speed M DCT, we also have M adaptive suspension, we've got M Servotronic steering, we have a number of different upgrades, and up front, we have a 460 horsepower 3-litre straight 6. So let's put it into gear, handbrake off, and head out onto the roads to discover what this car is like. We're starting off actually in the configuration that it has in front of me, so automatic on the gearbox, but in the softer of its 3 individual modes. We have efficient for the powertrain engine response side of things, sport for the suspension, sport for the steering, and you can customize this to your heart's content. You can change just about everything in this car to individually set it up, and even when you have set it up, you have the hot M1 and M2 buttons mounted on the steering wheel to save your pre-configured preferences there ready straight away for the push. So you can also have them doing the traction control through its various stages, the steering, the suspension, the exhaust, literally everything, which is what I like quite so much. And I think it still carries some of that traditional BMW M driving enjoyment. You know, these cars were built to be drivers' cars, and you do still get that. You obviously mix it in this with stop-start, for example, amongst other technologies, various different safety systems. It's not 5 Series level, you know, not completely loaded up to the absolute max as I've experienced in the M5 that I'm currently driving from BMW. Some notable differences as well to talk about, but when you drive along, you definitely feel there is more of a sports car character to it. It feels more boisterous, which is the segment that it's in, right? It's their small saloon car in its top sporty version. You have the regular M3, the M3 competition package, and then way up top you have the M3 CS. They're produced in limited numbers. As I mentioned, it's going to be limited by the capacity they can build, not a strict number, but roughly 1,200 of them in total, the European cars for which just about sold out, as they told us. So clearly there's high demand for the car. Driving in it right now though, you feel like you're in a small, nimble car. The mirrors, the traditional M-style mirrors. I love the massive wide arches. Looking in the door mirrors, you just see this gigantic arch on the rear axle, which I guess emphasises that it's a rear-wheel drive car, that it is that traditional BMW, really. So, notching it along like this, not doing anything particularly dramatic, but we can play with individual preferences, put it up into Sport Plus where it gets a touch noisier. I'll keep the suspension in Sport, but go into Sport Plus for the steering, where I can feel instantly, actually, even at slow speeds, that it weights itself up a little bit. You can feel that it's a little bit heavier and more, I guess, pushing back against you, which is the feedback you get from the car, right? That's what makes it a pleasurable driving experience, as we're going to experience on the track sections later on. Here though, just to hear some of that engine noise. It's not quiet, and as you lift off, you get that quite raspy sound out of it as well. So one more push to the right and it goes into manual, and the quickest setting that it has. Drop some gears, burbles galore. Now that's quite cool. It revs up to 7,600 RPM, which for a twin turbocharged 6-cylinder engine is actually quite a lot. Definitely is a characterful engine. It makes some interesting sounds out of it. The thing that I'm struggling with though is you have to think what this price tag, what territory that puts you into. That's almost baby supercar money, and this is their small saloon car, the smallest of the lineup. Now that definitely twists me slightly. Oh, gonna have to wait for this truck, unfortunately. Oh, hopefully we'll get a clear run. I'm gonna head out onto the Autobahn for a moment, although it's definitely a pretty busy day today. Pulls away with a bit of a jump, a bit of a let's get up and go, let's go out and drive. But that's what this thing is for, right? You're not going to buy this unless you're a driving enthusiast, unless you want a car that is there and ready for you to take it. And I'm actually quite intrigued to see what it's going to be like when we do get to stretch the legs more. Even just doing this is fun. I've got something sliding around in the door pocket though, so please excuse me for that. So let's get away from the trucks, go find somewhere we can stretch it further. Here we go then. So the settings are all as they were. It does look quite busy with trucks today, so you've got to watch out, but we should get an opportunity to put the foot down a little bit and see what this car has to offer. So out we go then, and foot down, away we go. Do you know what? Oh, the nice kick on upshifts definitely gives you a proper sensation, almost an inertia kind of push forwards, a propulsion ahead of you. So don't get to go too fast. Have to think a little bit about the power, because really at this price point, do you want the car to be a little bit faster? I know this is at the top end of what this engine is actually capable with, and I believe it's the fastest mainstream, or the most powerful mainstream production 3 Series that BMW have made. There was the M3 GTS of the E92 generation, but that wasn't a main production car. That was a special series, a limited edition version, so to say. Although maybe that's what you can call this as well. I'm not sure where 1,200 cars really puts it in that end of the spectrum. If we just sort of back off a little bit though, just to experience the pull of the power a touch more on a slightly more open stretch. There's nobody behind me, just a line of cars on front, unfortunately, into third gear, just to go up towards the red line, where the shift lights come alive on the dashboard, giving you a wonderful, actually, graphic. It's quite old school, but perfect, up towards 200, so 100 to 200 kilometers an hour or so. decent pull, rear-wheel drive, Sport Cup 2 tyres. If the weather was bad, you'd definitely want to be aware of that, aware of what's going on. It feels quite firm, not uncomfortably so, but exactly, I suppose exactly where they're trying to position it. I tell you, when you have your foot flat to the floor, it's definitely very noisy inside the cabin. Yes, it's slightly artificial. You can hear that some of the soundtrack is coming from down almost towards the footwells from the speakers, but that's due to legislation, due to the laws. BMW trying to make the cars still have some character while not being too loud from the outside. Now this car has a sporty exhaust system, as you would expect from a CS. CS being derived from the traditional name, the CSL of the E46 M3. But sitting almost as the sportiest top-of-the-line models. I mean, for Autobahn cruising, it's plenty of power, that's for sure. I think on the track, well, it'll be interesting to see how the aero capabilities work. It seems like we've got a busy section right now, but just cruising along, let's see what it's like. Going around these corners, actually, holding onto a nice tight, chunky steering wheel. Feels pretty good, but here we go again. Back out onto the Autobahn, third gear, foot flat. Not bad. I love about Germany, up to 200 kilometers an hour straight away, 210, 220, 230. We're going to have to back off a moment. Yeah, we've gone up to 245 and back onto the brakes for some cars in front of us. The general traffic's cruising at 200 or so. So it gets up to that speed fairly effortlessly. The sound is nice. The gear shift, well, set up like this, is certainly quite a push. You could actually toggle it down with the button just beneath the gear lever down into the softer setting. Just to experience actually what that's like, shifting up, drop back a little bit just to open up some space. But here I expect it will be slightly less aggressive. Yeah, completely smooth. That's the thing with these gearboxes, they can be configured to be exactly how you want. So the third mode is very sporty, perhaps too much so for driving on the road like this. The bottom mode is maybe a bit soft, presumably the one in the middle is exactly where you'd want to have it. Let's see if we get another stretch. Top speed, by the way, is 280 kilometers per hour, electronically limited. That's 173 miles per hour. So standard in these cars is to normally have a top speed of 250 k's, 155 miles per hour. But in this case, it has what would have been the optional driver's package on the regular M3, which raises that up to the full 280. So that's limited electronically. That's not the top speed of the car. There aren't too many scenarios really where you want to drive faster than 280, other than if you were doing a VMAX run. So it is a little bit too busy, but nonetheless, we can have plenty of sound inside this cabin. Up and away, it's very sure of itself at speed. 260 odd kilometers an hour right now, 265, and I'm going to back off. Yes, there's a fair amount of wind noise at that speed, of course. Brakes are good, we've got the carbon ceramic brakes in here, the optional ceramic brake on the standard car. Adrenaline rush, there's a lot of noise inside obviously when you're doing that. It will do that up to 280. It's crazy when you think about it, isn't it? That's a 3 Series. Yes, it's a very top of the line 3 Series, but a BMW 3 Series comfortable at 260 plus kilometers per hour. Back at the driving academy, and we're going to be going out on track any moment now, but let me quickly run round and show you inside the engine bay of this car. So we've got a nice M footrest. If I pop open the engine bay, we can come and have a quick look at this just very quickly here before we head out, and you'll see the carbon fibre reinforced plastic of this, a very light bonnet that lifts up, but the raw materials that you have right under there. So this, the 3 litre straight 6, twin scroll turbochargers, twin power as they call it, so a biturbo engine making 460 horsepower, and it's 600 newton meters of torque in the CS. It's 550 newton meters in the regular M3 and the M3 competition, 450 horsepower in the competition, 425 horsepower, 420 horsepower or so in the regular M3, so a little improvements on that side, also more torque mounted underneath the very nice carbon fibre strut brace that it wears as well. But let's jump in. It is time to go straight out onto this drive, surrounded here by plenty of the cars, and enjoy it on the track. We've had a few little exercises just speeding up braking, pressing the brakes firm, and I have to say, this car is very, very stable under heavy braking. But now we've got a few laps of the track, first in M1 mode, so some sporty settings, but not the full-on. Then we'll go into M2 with MDM, M dynamic mode as well, and experience that afterwards. So let's get around in a little parade of M3 CSs on their test track here. Away we go. This is a fun little track with a few chicanes set out as we can experience here, but the amazing thing is how stable this car is under heavy braking. The carbon ceramics are wonderful, and this is pretty much what I expected through these tight twisty bits. The car is super nimble, a very fun car to drive. We've been instructed to keep it in M1 just for the moment, so automatic gearbox mode and a few traction aids, which you definitely notice slightly interfering on occasion, but it feels good. It feels really, really very, very good. Just on a small cool down, I've noticed that the gearbox sometimes doesn't go quite as low as you want it to, so a push to the right goes into manual mode. If we press M2 though, press it twice just to confirm because we're lowering the state of traction, now we get to explore a little bit further and stretch the car and see what it's capable of. Concentration here in absolute overload as we fly around this track. The Sport Cup 2 tyres doing their sticky work. M2 with the MDM mode really bringing out the playful character of this car. Plenty quick enough for a small, tight, twisty handling circuit like this. Firm on the brakes. Feeling that second dab here just to balance the car before we turn into the corner. Feel a little bit of the back playing around, and away we go up towards the red line. This is exactly my kind of fun. That was hilarious fun, to be honest. Concentration in overdrive, but it's a very welcoming car. You jump in and just feel like you can really push that without too much work, and that's very rewarding when you're at the wheel. It's quite interesting to hear the cars blasting around from the outside because they're not actually all that loud. It makes you realise that a good chunk of the sound is being funneled in through the speakers because as they fly by, yes, there's a nice raspy six-cylinder engine note, a traditional kind of sound, but there's not that much of it, even though it sounded so loud when we were inside the cars earlier. Quite intriguing to watch though, looks awesome as they come past the blue cars here. The downshifts are always good as well, and those burbles on the overrun, those are definitely very nice. Now that's more like it. That sounds very good when you rev it up towards the red line. Now it's time for a few little drag races between the two cars. There is a little learning curve to get it right. The M3 CS has two different modes, the launch control and also the slightly burnout mode that we've also witnessed. Awesome to see and hear with the cars, the way that it shifts between gears and still leaves rubber down on the tarmac. But I think it's probably nearly time to head over and take a proper look around the inside of the M3 CS. With the noise of cars blasting around the track in the background, let's take a look around, go for a proper walk around of the car and talk about some other tidbits of information about the M3 CS. And let's start with BMW M in general, who in 2017 sold over 80,000 cars, up about 20% from the previous year. Just a moment to enjoy the sound as they go down the straight. So huge demand for M cars, hence a limited edition model like this sells out virtually instantly. Everybody would love to get hold of one. You can see why driving it. The experience, an awful lot of fun. So the M3 CS has set a Nürburgring Nordschleife time of 7 minutes and 38 seconds. So that might not be the fastest thing in the world, and I put that down to it not having a huge amount of straight line power. 460 horsepower is a lot, but it's not, 600 plus like the M5, for example. So the car's dynamics are particularly wonderful. The tyres are super sticky, the standard Sport Cup 2s that it comes with, as opposed to the less sticky tyres you'd have on other models. But you've still got to move a car that weighs 1,585 kilos, just under 1.6 tons. It might be a touch lighter than the previous or regular M3 models. You know, the roof I think is 6 kilos lighter. The bonnet, being made out of the CFRP, is about 25% lighter than the standard car. The wheels, 9 kilos for the front wheels each, 10 kilos for the rear wheels each, an inch larger at the back. Carbon ceramic brakes, giving them that astonishing stopping power, to be completely honest. So the suspension, steering, that side of things, all set up very nicely. The sound has been an interesting one. When revving it stationary, it sounded brilliant, but on the move, outside, not necessarily the best. Inside though, you do feel like you've got an awesome sounding car around you. This colour is lovely. I think the smart additions, you know, BMW create these cars that are dynamic but don't shout, they don't scream, so unless you know what you're looking at, you don't really necessarily know what it is. For example, look here, look at this rear arch. Look at how wide that is. That bulge, that is a lovely thing, and you see that from the door mirrors when you're driving. Small things like the air opening here to reduce swelling from the front, the bulge on the bonnet, the additional vent, sporty touches. So you get this black package with the CS, the high gloss package around the car. Let's head back to the interior actually and talk more about what we've got going on in here, because a little bit of lightweight, not quite as many lightweight things as the M4 CS. So the M4 CS had the finish you can see through the centre, this style, also for the door cards, but this retains the more standard M3 door card. Nicely finished, nice leather, stitching, and looks smart, but not quite as sporty as the two-door equivalent. The seats I think are very smart. This bit through here is strange, takes some getting used to, but hey, weight savings, hey, by getting rid of that small area. The M3 badging here in the centre is very smart, along with that stripe that I mentioned earlier. If we take a step back into the car, actually, just quickly before I do, the seats are manual, so you can see the movements here. There is one electronic part, which I believe is maybe the underleg bolster, but the other parts are all manual. M seat belts, nice touch as well. Take a step inside the car. I'm actually going to start it up because it's very hot and I could do with some air conditioning blowing at me. So coming over to the door, let's start here. As usual, your window controls, your mirror controls, all very 3 Series, and yeah, there will be a new 3 Series in not too long, so these might be a bit plasticky and outdated, but a new model will come along to rectify those in the not too distant future. Light controls, your usual lights, automatic main beam on the end of that. The shifter paddles, very small little paddle, but easily reachable just behind the back of the steering wheel. A nice feel to it when you do pull the button and press them as well. Then you've got your cruise control commands, your M1 and M2 button that you will see change when you select them, the various different driving modes underneath the rev counter on the right hand side. So if I just select M2, which you have to press again to confirm, you can see it tying up there and reporting how exactly we've got it set. Over to the left, you've got your fuel gauge, your speedometer with an M badge on the digital screen right below that at the moment, a couple of warning symbols in the center, speedometer, your trip down at the bottom, rev counter, and your oil temperature over to the right. This is the most interesting bit though, when you change through the different settings based on how you have the center panel down here set up. To the right side, you've got your phone, your media controls as you'd expect, and your light stalk around the back. And one small detail is the M coloured stitching that you have around the inside of the Alcantara steering wheel, along with this 12 o'clock stripe. I really like that. It's very subtle by having those perforations, but you do have the 12 o'clock stripe, which is always a very smart, sporty feel, and it matches in with the texture you have for the CS logo on the dashboard on the passenger side. You've obviously got the older Idrive system now here up at the top. It's got newer software, but it's still a slightly smaller screen. So you've got the tiles that you can customize and move around, but it's not quite, you know, the M5 system, for example. Down beneath that, your air vents, your hotkeys, so these can all be pre-configured to take you to instant commands you might want. So that's just jumped into DAB. Depends how you set it up, really, and how you want that. Coming down further, this has regular air conditioning rather than the full dual zone climate control or the like, so fairly simple. So it's actually quite unusual to drive a car with such a simple system. We do have heated seats, which you'd lose with the likes of bucket seats. Then you have your stop start button and your auto start stop. Further below that, you've got a small area here for small things, your cup holders and a 12-volt socket hiding away underneath the center console. The M gear stick, which moves to the right to go into drive, to the right again for sport, up for manual, down for up for down a gear, push it that way for down a gear in manual, pull it that way for up a gear in manual, across to neutral, or forwards like that for reverse. We don't have a reversing camera, just the sensor graphic that shows us what's going on around us. So back into neutral for the moment, handbrake right behind, manual handbrake. This is your toggle for the gearbox settings to take it through the three different gearbox modes that we have available. And then your parking cameras. Here you have your steering control to go between the different modes, Comfort, Sport, Sport Plus. You have your suspension to go through Comfort, Sport and Sport Plus, and you have your response again, but this time efficient, Sport and Sport Plus, then traction to go into MDM or turn it back on depending how you want to have it all set up. On the right, the Idrive Controller. This is probably very familiar to you from BMWs. They were one of the first to actually introduce a system like this, and now we see it on just about every manufacturer's car that is out there. But we can go through the screen, toggling through different things, you know, navigation, depending how you want to have it really, what you'd like to show. This is nice and responsive, brings up the map very quickly. Media, radios, back to the menu, just press some buttons to see if we can just keep it going through. You can configure your M drive in here. There you can have a nice look at the different settings and how this car is currently configured. Yeah, nice. You can control the head-up display, which you might just be able to see in front of me there with the rev counter running over the top. Just rev it up a little bit so you can see that. Very nice. So back to home on that. So that is basically it. You lose any armrest storage or the light back here, other than a USB port lurking just behind the handbrake. Passenger side, all much the same. Finish runs over the glove box, which I've got full of stuff at the moment, the route book and the light that I've been running on today. And then up top, just a simple thing with your light controls and the BMW SOS button, because it's connected to full services. So while it's still running, it tells me to protect against rolling away because I've left it in gear. Actually, maybe I left it out of gear, sorry, put it in gear just to switch it off. It puts itself automatically into park. Ignore tyre pressure messages. We've been driving out on track, so obviously lower the pressures for that bit of driving earlier. Just to come look in the back, that front seat was in my driving position, so we can see how much space there is back here. Quite an easy aperture actually, the opening, because the rear wheels sit so far back. Climbing in pretty easy in the back, and a ton of space, impressively so actually. There is a lot of room back here. Do you know what? I feel like there might be more room in the back of the M3 than in the M5. That doesn't make any sense, except maybe it's because the seats are smaller. The M5 seats are very fat and bulky. It's quite fascinating actually. There's a lot of room. The rear backrest is very reclined, so you feel like you're leaning very far back, but that's presumably to give you a touch more headroom. I don't have the most in the world. It's not bad. I'm fine. I'm about 1.78 m, that sort of height, 5'10", 5'11", and I seem to be fine back here. Reasonably comfortable. Speaker grills I can see on the rear shelf behind me. Let's hop back out just quickly to show you in the boot. Lots of tweeters around here. Gosh, this colour is cool. So I open the boot up. Lots of space. It's a saloon, 60/40 folding rear seats. Lots of my camera junk and stuff just putting in the back, but obviously a practical family car. Now there is something very, very stylish about this form factor. A car that can be used every day for all purposes, but is a complete sleeper to those that don't know what it actually is. We've seen that the car is more than capable of laying down some very nice 11s from its rear driven axle, but then it's also quite comfortable to cruise in, drive and use as well. So to me, it's very exciting. It's the sporty, more purist dynamic version of the BMW M3, which is already a very, very good car to drive. My biggest, I suppose, drawback on it is that this is over £100,000 of car, and that could get you into a BMW M5 if you'd prefer, along with newer technology and a lot more power. Needless to say though, I've had an awesome time driving this car today. I hope you've enjoyed this very thorough look at it, both inside and out, driving on the road, driving on the track. So a big thanks to BMW and BMW M for creating the car and for having me along today to experience it and share with you a little bit about what it is like. So that is it from me for today. Thank you very much as always, guys, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.